Hi, and welcome to the Bruce Channel. I'm Bruce, and we won't have a lot of different topics today, but where we must begin: hurricanes. Last show I led with Hurricane Harvey, rightly so. The devastation from flooding was everything that we feared, and although cleanup continues, and the Red Cross is there and other charities are doing all that they can, life won't fully return to Houston and the Texas area is affected, at least not fully normal, for years. So just a bit over 2 weeks ago, I recall seeing a local meteorologist speaking of tropical systems and particularly Hurricane Harvey. Then he pointed to a place in the eastern Atlantic, saying this is already a tropical storm. We don't know much about it, but we know that it's awfully early. That is, it hadn't moved far from the African coast, and yet it was already classified as tropical. And he said, we'll watch it, but if it does do something, it's about 2 weeks away. He was spot on, wasn't he? It became a hurricane and then achieved major hurricane status, that is Cat 3 or greater, earlier in its track than any other storm on record. And of course, Hurricane Irma then turned into a Cat 5. As a Category 5, it several distinctions. Sustained winds of 185 miles an hour for a longer period of time than any other previous storm, holding on to Cat 5 status for more successive hours than any previous storm. And of course, when this gets published Sunday morning, we'll know more about its path. At my deadline, it looks pretty dire for all of southern Florida. The Keys, both coasts, with the West Coast now more in the sights. I've got friends and relatives on both coasts. Evacuations in Florida have been mandatory for years. One can only hope. I remember 25 years ago, I was on the air that morning when Andrew hit Florida as a Cat 5, and of course the destruction was unbelievable. Homestead, Florida was flattened. Irma could be worse because it's projected to move all the way up the peninsula instead of just heading directly in as Andrew did. And Irma is bigger. And if there's a storm surge, all the wonderful beachfront hotels and the condos and the resorts, they could be damaged or destroyed even. And again, with the restrictions imposed by my deadline, we also don't know where it will go later. Parts of Georgia have mandatory evacuations. South Carolina evacuations. South Carolina has interstates, but every time I drive through South Carolina, I'm always surprised to realize again how much of their interstate system is just 2 lanes in either direction. They've learned, though, for evacuations, they turn them into 4 lanes by reversing the flow on one of the ways. Typically, if you're evacuating the coast, the eastbound lanes become westbound lanes. It's a nightmare. Everywhere in Florida and eastern Georgia and much of South Carolina, there are shortages, no bottled water available. I'm hearing that even in North Carolina. Gasoline is in short supply, and where it is available, the lines are very, very long. Of course, the most recent predicted path turns it west. My governor, Roy Cooper, has placed all 100 North Carolina counties into a state of emergency, and that was early in the week when it was still unknown where it was going to go. That was that's good foresight. But now with the change in path, now what about Atlanta and Alabama? And by the time it reaches Tennessee, it'll still bring lots of rain, but maybe not so much devastation. So if it misses me, good. But I've got friends in Atlanta and Tennessee too. We've already seen some of the islands and how destructive Irma will be. And think of this. There have been gasoline shortages. Once the storm passes by and electricity is off, the estimates are that over 2 million customers will not have power. When the power companies say customers, they mean meters. A household or a business. Every meter may have a household of 2, 3, 4, or more, so it will be millions and millions and millions of people without power. And not only families and ordinary citizens, hospitals maybe. Sometimes they have generators, but a backup system rarely provides as much power as you normally have when everything's running right. Banks. Nobody in banks uses the old bookkeeping ways anymore. It's all computers, so no ATMs. Gas in short supply? Yeah, until the power gets back on, there's no pumping gas. I don't know, do groceries have backup generators? Lots of refrigeration needed, but it might be weeks before the power is even mostly on. So, once again, we will hear lots of our thoughts and prayers A couple of related thoughts on hurricanes. One, people watching the first NFL game of the season Thursday night had a surprise. All 5 living former presidents came together and called on all Americans to come together. It was refreshing. Democrats and Republicans, yeah, they know each other, they respect each other, they don't always agree on everything, but they understand what the job requires. Nuance, serious thinking. Take a look.
Hurricane Harvey brought terrible destruction, but it also brought out the best in humanity.
As former presidents, we wanted to help our fellow Americans begin to recover.
Our friends in Texas, including Presidents Bush 41 and 43, are doing just that.
People are hurting down here, but as one Texan put it, we've got more love in Texas than water.
We love you, Texas.
Donate to oneamericaappeal.org. We are all in this together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So there's that. Yeah, there's the Red Cross, but have you seen what their CEO makes? Catholic Charities is a good choice. They help non-Catholics too, but their administrative costs are low. And I'm impressed by the 5 ex-presidents. And maybe that's who gets my support. I've got to do more research on that. By the way, 5 living former presidents, that's a big number. It's tied for the most ever. Doesn't set a record. Previous occasions we've had 5 formers. Other hurricane thoughts? Harvey was devastating to much of Texas, but I didn't hear much about climate change vis-a-vis Harvey, and I honestly believe that's correct. I do believe the overwhelming majority of scientists say climate change is real and that mankind has caused it. I believe that. But I don't think it's fair to characterize Houston's flood to global warming. It was a big storm, yeah, but there are big storms from time to time. What wiped out Houston was the unhappy circumstance. It just so happened that there was not a strong jet stream or a cold front or a trough to move it along, so it just parked and sat for days and days and days dumping. The wind had died down, but 30 inches, 40 inches, 50 inches of rain in just a few days, that's going to devastate anybody anywhere. On the other hand, Irma formed quickly soon after it left the African coast, and it became a Cat 3 sooner than any other had done, and that is almost certainly a byproduct of global warming. I think it's foolish to believe otherwise, but, there's no crime. It's not a crime to be foolish. I have heard some really foolish things, though. Perhaps foolish is the wrong word. Fear-mongering because of greed. Do you remember a few years ago when Pat Robertson blamed the Haitian earthquake on Haiti's pact with the devil? Not with fault lines, but with a pact with the devil. Just a week or so ago, a pastor said Hurricane Harvey hit because Houston, wait for it, because Houston had elected an openly gay mayor a few years ago. I believe the motive for that is to make you fearful. According to them, disobeying God means you will be punished. And there's Kirk Cameron. He didn't say it's punishment, but he says, God now and again shows off. Yeah, and thunder is from Thor's hammer, or the angels bowling. Right. My question, why is this God that they reference sending hurricanes to punish? Why not lightning bolts? Bad person? Zap. Another bad person? Zap. Hurricanes hurt millions. And for what it's worth, I'd have to wonder why so many hurricanes hit places like Alabama and Texas and Mississippi and South Carolina and Florida. I've been in all those places, and I'm telling you, maybe excluding Florida, but any of them could claim to be the buckle on the Bible Belt. So by extension, lots of good, God-fearing, obedient believers get flooded, lose everything, drown, lose their pets. I don't think that's a very fair God, but that's the one they reference. I don't think it's a very bright God either, but I don't think these mega pastors much care. If they can keep you fearful, keep on sending the money. We'll revisit this theme someday, but there's one other hurricane note. Did you hear what Rush Limbaugh said? He said, these big hurricane warnings are a conspiracy by the news organizations and the big box stores, Costco, Walmart, Sam's Club. Why? Because the broadcasters get you to tune in, and the advertising costs go up, and then the retailers get to sell more water and batteries. It's a conspiracy. Why does anyone listen to this fat fraud? I'm not calling that because he makes a conservative argument. You want to make a reasonable argument for conservative principles? That's great. George Will, David Brooks, the late William F. Buckley, I think they all presented facts responsibly in a reasoned way. They would try to persuade rather than bluster and frighten. But Rush, he spouts bilge. Oh, and for what it's worth, despite his calling big hurricanes a conspiracy, he hightailed his fat ass out of Florida.
Hey, let me tell you about my book, Shrink. For most of my adult life, I weighed a little over 100 pounds. Not much more than in this picture taken when I was about 17 and considering becoming a jockey. But as is often true, once I crossed into my 40s, extra weight came and it stayed. For years I tried to lose, instead gained, and ended up 153 pounds. And I'm embarrassed to show you this video. Then I learned that it isn't about calories and exercise, but instead it's about what you eat. You might say, sure, ice cream makes you fat. But there were surprises, things like orange juice not being such a wise choice if you're trying to lose weight. So I just made some basic changes to what I ate, not how much, and the weight just fell off. Now, nearly 3 years later, it is still off. And don't misunderstand, I'm eating foods I like, not bamboo shoots. Friends ask me how I did it so often, I put it in a book. It's available as an ebook for all platforms, and the print edition is available at barnesandnoble.com and amazon.com. Hey, you can shrink too.
We had a light shower the other morning, and when I first stepped out, because it was gorgeous, I took a picture. This is just gorgeous. A light shower, and the light was coming through the web, and it was just glistening as though it were in the lane. Snow is glistening. Imagine if spiders could build their webs in the winter and maybe see this kind of magic all the time. All right, so preseason football is over. The NFL is underway, so is college football. You know, it's early, but the consensus seems to have 2 college teams picked, more than the others, to reach the national championship game in January. Anyone want to hazard a wild guess? You're right, Alabama and Ohio State. Now, as a Buckeye, I can't be too upset about that, but honest, if I lived in Colorado or Utah or California, I'd have to say, really? Can't anybody else play? Yeah, the Floridians have the Seminoles and the Gators, and they hate Georgia, and Ole Miss and Mississippi State will have their showdown, as will USC and UCLA. But were I one of them, I'd have to be frustrated that it always seems to be these 2. And the NFL, it's time to make my Super Bowl picks, which is meaningless. Yeah, by the way, 2 teams that each hope to make a return to the playoffs this year after years of absence. 2 teams out of Florida's 3. Miami and Tampa Bay, and their chances took a hit. They were supposed to play each other today in Miami. They're not in the same conference, but, you know, Florida bragging rights. But the Storm forced a postponement. They will play week 11. That means they're having a bye first week. Ouch. I think they start bye weeks too early. I think week 7 through 10 is okay, and if you have serious ideas of deep penetration of the playoffs, week 11 or 12 would be ideal. Rest up, heal some of the things that hurt and make ready for the big push. But these 2 Florida teams won't get a break. They will have to play 16 straight games. That's just regular season. Anyway, I think the Final 4 will be New England and Pittsburgh in the AFC, and Seattle and Green Bay in the NFC. By the way, I've been reading some had suggested that New England would go undefeated the entire season. Well, that's out. They lost Thursday. Of course, making picks before the season, as I said, isn't serious. There will be injuries. Some of those injuries will completely wipe out a team's hopes. And, there's always a surprising breakout team or breakout player. I actually expect my Browns to have a breakout season. I do. No, they're not going to the playoffs, but they will surprise. So, the final tilt, the Super Bowl, I'm picking actually heart more than head. Pittsburgh versus Seattle, with the Super Bowl then providing a good close game that Pittsburgh wins. Of course, at this point, everyone's still in it. right, so I told you about my role on Lieutenant Joe Kenda, Homicide Hunter, and yes, I made my network debut on Wednesday night. Contractually, I wasn't able to speak much about it before it aired, but now I can. I should first thank the many friends and family who offered congratulations, and yes, certainly, I do appreciate it. No, given my role, that of the victim, and the way the show was formatted, because the show starts with someone being dead, being the victim, never provides the kind of intense lines that an actor would love to have. I played a frail World War II vet, old and frail, and all of my lines and even actions came as flashbacks. Few things to say, but more often just giving looks of disgust or fear or whatever. And because I was old and frail, I adopted a different voice than the one you hear me use weekly, but I think I can tell you some things about the show that might provide interesting trivia or background. First, Lieutenant Joe Kenda is a real guy. He retired from the Colorado Springs Police Department. He's credited with solving almost 400 homicides in his career. The episodes are from true cases, and most of the time, if not always, the names are real. So Joe Kenda films his story, telling the story. He's in Colorado. He still lives there. Also filmed are former or current Colorado police officers and detectives who would have worked on a specific case. Sometimes the actual coroner or the district attorney, and sometimes the real-life friends or family of the victims, and always a real-life reporter who was familiar with the case at the time it happened. So Joe Kenda might tell the camera, on that particular day I noticed the car had not one but two flat tires. What gives with that? Then Carl Marino, the actor who plays the young Kenda, will do that. He'll notice the two flat tires and he'll look for a cause. Maybe he sees a bag of nails in the driveway or the pavement. Anyway, they go back and forth like that. Real Kenda telling the story and the recreations, then filmed. And that's what I did. And the recreations, by the way, are all filmed in Knoxville, Tennessee, which is why sometimes the leaves on the trees don't exactly match what you'd expect for, say, December in Colorado. Casting looks for people who resemble or at least fit a general description of the people involved. African American, Caucasian, bald, bearded, blonde, dark-haired. For more peripheral characters, someone might say something like, no, I didn't see anything. The description isn't so important. What's cool is all the police officers, you see, they're really police officers in Knoxville. They use Knoxville police cars. I'm sure the city receives some compensation for that. And the real police officers work on their days off. There are magnetic signs they use to cover Colorado Springs, and they cover the signs that say Knoxville Police. I don't know how they're fixed, but the cloth shields on the shirt sleeves also say Colorado Springs and cover up Knoxville. My first day, I only shot the morgue scene. I was asked to not shave or cut my nails for the weeks leading up to that. So when I saw Carl Marino and said, hi, I'm the Stiff, he introduced himself, made me feel welcome. I'd seen the script and I worried aloud about the cold of the steel table. Hoped I could hold still while on the table. And he said, yeah, that used to be a problem. Now they put a heat lamp under it before you need to climb on it. So how cool is that? How warm is that? Anyway, of course, I was heavily made up for the morgue scene. I don't guess it was like being in Planet of the Apes, but it took hair and makeup artist Katie Proud maybe 90 minutes or more to bring me to an appropriate level of decay. And the chest sutures, I mean, she's an artist, I'll tell you. And of course, afterwards, she helped clean me up. Now, the next day, I didn't have much to do. The two apartments where Paul and his neighbor lived was a real apartment, but the real occupants let us all use, probably for a fee. I'm sure of that. And that's where my kitchen scene was filmed. Then the following day was a long day, me in the apartment. Lots of drinking and smoking, and by the way, they supplied the cigarettes. They're not real. They look real, they perform real, but they're not tobacco. They're some kind of vegetable, but no nicotine. So I said we're all drinking and smoking, and in my case, dying. It was fun. The entire crew and company were great, and obviously it was a step forward. A little bit of trivia here. In the one scene, it's very brief, near the beginning, they pan over me and you see the table and there's a picture there. That's a real picture of young me with a young woman that I was dating at the time. I thought that would make a nice touch. They did too. One other thing about film acting, this is always the case. The cast and the crew is always fed. They fed us on Samka, they fed us on Mercy Street, In Dubious Battle, Obama Land, Homicide Hunter, everything. Usually caterers bring food. Some of the smaller projects, it was pizza, but there's always food. And when it's catered, it's good, and there's a variety, so you can be vegan or paleo or whatever you want to do. I have a national commercial that's coming up. I don't know when it will air. Maybe beginning, I think not earlier than next month. Anyway, I'll tell you more about that maybe next week. So if you're not in Irma's path, I hope your upcoming week is the best you've ever had. For Irma people, I hope you get through this week with minimal impact.